And joining me now is Tom Packer, a fellow at University College London's Centre of US Politics. Tom, always good to see you. Marco Rubio, sure enough, making all the headlines here in Munich. What did you make of his speech? Is it a way to sort of repair the relationship with Europe?
I think he was certainly trying to be tactful, which is generally how he rolls. He tries to be pleasant and communicate things in the way that's likely to most draw on the sympathies. But I think someone I was speaking to today said it's the same thing as Trump said, but he said it more nicely. And I think in particular, it's very similar to what J.D. Vance was saying a year ago. And Stephen, I was saying, he had a line, someone was pointing this out to me, together if we can, alone if we must. So the fundamentals were very similar. We need Europe to do more security. Europe and immigration policies are a disaster. We need to move away from a free trade economy. He put it in a much less anti-European way, implicitly anti-Chinese, but he didn't actually spell that out. But what he did do is make a big thing, which actually, if you read him carefully, so did J.D. Vance, on the European roots. And the Estonian foreign minister was very pleased by the Europe is the child, America is the child of Europe kind of comments, which is just true, of course. And I think that is part of what drives less Trump himself and more so his associates like Rubio, the belief that European civilization is part of Western civilization is getting lost. So just as one shouldn't overread some of Trump's bullying and bluster, I don't think one should overread what the positive side of what Rubio was saying. It's fundamentally the same point. Europe needs to do more on security, crack down on immigration, more on not be so hostile to nationalist movements. There's fundamentally a challenge to Europe there. But because he followed the kind of stuff Trump and J.D. Vance has been saying, he got a much better reception than if this had been the first thing the Trump administration had said.
It's interesting what you're saying. So basically, he had the same message as J.D. Vance, just in a different tone. I guess J.D. Vance had the boxing gloves on, whereas Marco Rubio had the sort of silk mittens on. But if the message is the same, why does it appear that all these European leaders are now saying, yeah, great, it seems like maybe we can repair this relationship, if in fact they're still saying the same things?
I think there's probably a number of things. One is the realization of just how much the entire system they're running relies on the United States. So I think that's a factor. I think to some degree what they're asking for, one doesn't have to like, but it's maybe not that unreasonable. Like US administration has been saying for decades, the Europeans should pull more of their weight on security. I also think there's an element that there's quite a strong consensus in most European capitals that of the leading figures in Trump foreign policy, Marco Rubio is if not one of, certainly if not the one of, the most pro-West, pro-Ukraine. So there's a feeling if they showered Rubio with love for saying these points on Ukraine. And he did, nothing he said contradicted what other people in the administration have said. But he was trying to say, well, he was going, I think this was in questions rather than the speech, towards saying Rubio was making the point that Trump sometimes doesn't. He relies on if the Russians actually mean it when they say they want peace and things like that. And particularly in Eastern Europe, which is more Ukraine focused, I think that went down very well. So I think it's partly the messenger, partly the message is maybe less, and partly an attempt to send signals to the United States that will keep US support going, particularly for Ukraine, but not exclusively.
Tom, as you're speaking, we're also looking at pictures of Marco Rubio meeting with the German Chancellor Merz. Of course, the headline from Merz's speech was that the rules-based world order no longer exists. So that leaves us the question, what kind of new world order are we actually looking at?
Yeah, no, but obviously, there are endless exceptions to any kind of rule, like virtually all the rules, with a handful of very few ones, like don't use nuclear weapons. Even that, of course, was only one developed after World War II, have been broken over the last 60, 70, or the last 35 years. Interestingly, I suspect Merz and Rubio will get on both well. They're both Russian hawks. In many ways, they argue with quite similar politics, like quite socially conservative, very pro-general Western, generally like trying to be quite right-wing without pushing too far. Arguably, Merz hasn't really delivered that as chancellor, but that's the politics he came from. He was a right-wing, anti-Russian alternative to Angela Merkel. And I think this is maybe a speech with kind of bridge for people like Merz to say the old rule-based order is gone, but we can maybe still work with the United States, and if we spend a bit more defense, which Merz has made massive efforts on there, and we don't like ban the AFD, and we try and restrict immigration, which Merz is making some efforts on, we can actually have a decent relationship with the Trump administration. I think that's partly why Rubio was giving the mood music he was. It makes it easier for people like Merz to carve out in that direction rather than the more anti-American direction.
All right, Tom, always good to see you. Thank you so much for your analysis.
Yeah.